Hello, just last week I got asked a bunch of questions on basically what's included in the GoodUI Premium membership. And I wanted to showcase a handful of experiments to give you a bit of a sense of what those look like. So first of all, members get access to all the experiments that are currently listed, as well as we add at least five new experiments each month from various companies, from e-commerce companies, from lead generation businesses, from agencies that work with e-commerce companies. And yeah, they get aggregated or organized as patterns. Patterns are essentially collections. So here's one pattern, basically asking the question whether we should have more or fewer plans. And from what members can see is that's not visible to the public is whether a pattern is good or bad, or whether it's negative or positive. Essentially, it's track record of how often it has won minus how often it has led to negative effects. So this is a first kind of weight of a pattern's generalizability, so to say, right? This kind of pattern itself is driven, and its weight is assigned based on similar experiments underneath that kind of pattern. So here we have Brian from Barometrics that has tested that particular pattern. Stanley from Backstage, a lead gen company, has tested something similar, 3 versus 2 plans. And anytime these kind of test results come in, whether they're positive or negative, they get aggregated under the pattern. Then similar metrics. So whenever someone runs an experiment that measures sales or revenue or signups or progression or leads or whatever, under this section here, we aggregate these kind of similar metrics to get a bit of a better sense from various websites and various experiments that are more comparable. This data here, I use and I encourage to use for estimates. So anytime someone runs experiments or plans or prioritizes their own experiments, this can gauge a bit of a sense of like what can be expected. Okay, so imagine that some patterns have low numbers, some have higher numbers. All this data can be then used to prioritize your own optimization program. Another question is around the actual test. So this is also what members can see. Usually probably 99% of the time we have data that includes sample size, that includes conversion counts. So here, for example, we have 2 metrics. Here's a progression, a kind of a softer metric of basically someone kind of going one step forward, and then there's a second metric, something more meaningful, further down the funnel, an actual sign up. So for either or of these metrics, we have, again, sample size, conversion data for both A and B, the conversion rate here, and then the relative conversion rate. And then in order to gauge significance levels, we also pre-calculate a p-value, which is an indication of how confident we are in this kind of, or the test has been in the measure. And so yeah, that's an example of some of the kind of experiments. And one other thing I'd like to mention is I publish everything independent of outcome, and I do this. So basically, if there's a negative effect or a positive effect, a significant or insignificant effect, all this gets published. And this is done in order to improve, again, these numbers here, to make them more accurate, to make them more reliable and trustworthy, so that as we plan new experiments, we have more and more accurate data. Okay. Another thing that people ask is about use cases. So like, how do we, given that there's all this information here, how do we use this? And one common answer is for optimizing, for anytime we want to kind of improve, I don't know, homepage or landing page or product page, I might open up these categories and basically see a list of particular patterns that were tested on product pages. And what members get to see is, because they have the ability to kind of access this information, to be able to sort patterns by the most effectiveness. Okay, so in this case, we're sorting by repeatability, which is like, again, that count of how often it has worked minus how often it has lost. So these are more generalizable positive patterns. And then, of course, again, these are the ones that are showing up above here are ones that have worked the most number of times. So you can imagine that this is a way of essentially doing kind of an analysis or checking for opportunities. Let's say you're optimizing, again, product pages, and you're looking for ideas that have worked before. This is the perfect way of kind of pulling prior information from, tied to past experiments. Another similar use case, or a similar kind of approach that I take is sometimes I sort by effect. So I can ask a question of like, okay, what has had the highest impact on sales? So something a bit more of a concrete query here, right? And then again, this data is only now using sales data or things that have improved transactions. And again, these patterns get resorted based on the data that we have, and the better patterns go up to the top versus some of the kind of less effective ones are further down on the page or on future pages. And one more use case, again, which I touched upon before, is estimating. So again, whether you choose to run an experiment or not, or whether you just decide to implement something, but if you do run experiments and want to retest something, which often is encouraged if possible, then again, these values, we typically use these to prioritize and make predictions. And and that's I find that this is way better than just making random guesses, whether making subjective guesses, which is a common pitfall of some of the kind of frameworks. You have to kind of make predictions out of the blue. So in order to avoid that, we combine multiple similar experiments together under patterns, and then these can be assigned to your own ideas that match the particular pattern. So hopefully this was useful to give you a better sense of what's available. And we keep adding new tests, and these patterns get corrected over time. They get weighed into the positive, to the negative as new data comes in. So thanks.